Welcome to class 2 of Immune System Strong. Today, we are going to talk about stress and how stress can sabotage your immune system. And it's a really important topic that everybody knows how important that is. I mean, whenever I ask, and who knows how important stress is and how it affects that, who understands the importance of stress and how much it affects their own health, everybody raises their hand. The question is, who is doing something? Like, what do you do about it, right? And so my goal today is not just to teach you, not only to teach you about the stress connection to the immune system, but also to start to be furthering our conversation about what to do about it. And all along, this is our second class. So this is week 3 now of the Immune System Strong course. And you'll see in the guidebook, you all have the Immune System Strong guidebook. And you see that the way that I decided to approach stress and sort of the discussion of stress and the teaching of relaxation skills, which is what I want to call it, the way I chose to sort of address it or teach you or work with it in this course is by putting it into the guidebook in every week, a new challenge or a new exercise or a new something new to try, but it's woven like a connecting thread through the entire program, the entire time we're together, the entire 8 weeks. And so every week there's something new for you to try. And it's an important piece of the coaching calls every week as well, checking in. How are you doing? How's your relaxation practice? What have you tried this week? And so today we are going to really dig into stress, and I'll sort of review also the what's in your guidebook and sort of where to find everything, because I think it's really important that you really utilize this as a resource. Let's see, what else do I want to say about stress? I think I'm just going to jump in. So I'm going to jump in and share my screen, well, what I will say before I do that, I sort of feel like I get my opening monologue. I'm just going to spend a few more minutes because I want to just point out that, for me, this has been part of my life's work. I've been on faculty with the Center for Mind Body Medicine for 15 years. And I started out, actually 1998 was my first training. So that's 22 years ago. And then I started in those early years of certification and all that. And then I ended up, I think, as faculty for the first time 15 years ago. And since then, I've been working, and my fellow faculty, we have day jobs, and we drop everything and take a week off and go train other health professionals in mind body medicine when there's a training program anywhere in the world, whether it's in a traumatized community or just a national training. And this work has really informed my life and who I am. It informs how I am with my patients, and I bring it to you. So the gift that the center has given me, I am sharing back with you, and I hope that you can feel that and will, after we finish our class today, appreciate some of these lessons that I want to share with you today. And so without further ado, I'm going to share my slides, because it'll just be redundant, because I'm going to start getting excited about mind-body medicine. But part of what we'll talk about today is mind-body medicine, mind and the body, right? How the emotions, thoughts, and feelings affect your body. And then how can you use your body to help affect your mind, right? And how can you also heal your body by establishing and understanding this mind-body connection. But first, you need to understand why this matters, because really your left brain might understand and realize, yes, oh, this is important, but gosh, I got to help you do it. People have all these barriers to starting some sort of meditation practice. Oh, I can't do that. But I know somebody that she just knits. Knitting is her thing. And that's a relaxation practice. So there are a lot of ways in, and we're going to talk about that. All right, so let me share my screen, and we are going to get to it. All right, where are my slides? There they are. All right, there we go. So this is Immune System Strong, and I'm going to go to my full-on deck there. All righty. All right, and so for those of you, so I can't give my talk, and I assume you see my little picture on the side. So I can't do the chat box while I'm doing the class, but I'm going to just jump in and do the class, and then questions will come later. All right. So immune system strong, class 2, stress. And so today I'm going to go through, just basically what is stress. We're going to talk about the stress response, which I call part 1 and part 2. One is the nervous system, the other is your hormone system. We're going to talk about the difference between acute and chronic stress and why that matters. And we're going to then talk about the immune system, which is really, what we're here to do today. And then, of course, end with mind-body medicine, which is really about, okay, here's what you can do about it and why it's so important. And we're going to help you. We're your coaches. We're just coaching you. This whole 8 weeks is to give you tools and to get you moving, to get you doing it. To get you to change your diet and have an experiment. Let's experiment now with how you're going to help mitigate the stress in your life, okay? So the first piece here is about, I always like to start out with really the definition of stress. What is stress, right? And so there's a difference between the stressor, which is something in your environment, and your stress response, right? So a stressor is something that's happening. It's something that's happening in your environment, and it's causing you to have a stress response. So when you feel stressed, you say, oh, I feel so stressed. It's because of these stressors. Now, stressor can be emotional, like I mentioned before, like emotional. Clearly, there are things that we know that you don't have to think twice. The death of a family member, getting a divorce. I mean, these things are obvious stressors. And there's the extreme of that, which is traumatic stress. So we're not really going to talk about trauma today, but my work that I do with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine is a lot about trauma and working with traumatic stress. But it's all on a spectrum, right? And so a stressor can be these emotionally very difficult things, but they can also be like getting married, positive events. You land your dream, you're starting a new job. And these things are all kind of it elicits you to have a stress response, but it can be something positive. So that's sort of the point as well, is that the stress response is a normal response of the body. Nature gave us a stress response because it helps me get ready for a talk. It helps you get prepared for your wedding. There are ways it gets you moving and getting things done. And so in some ways, the stress response is a really good thing. But it's supposed to be temporary, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. And so, again, stress then is the response to the body to a stressor. So all stressors cause a stress response in the body. And I love this slide because, clearly that snake would cause a huge stress response for me, and clearly it's not for in this culture. And so stressors are not the same for everybody. They're not equal opportunity employer. Like what might stress me might not stress you. And so there's a lot of personalized, you have to really understand that for yourself. And even when you're talking to friends and, really understand the things, the goal is for you to understand the things that stress you and not judge what might be stressing someone else. So again, I said before, the stress response is a normal function of the body, and it's supposed to turn on when you need it and then turn off when the stressor goes away. There's two major responses. One is the autonomic nervous system, and it's called autonomic because it was always thought to be automatic. That's the nervous system, and I'll say more about that in a sec. And then there's the stress response, which is the endocrine system, and that's something we call cortisol, right? And I'll tell you more about that in a minute as well. But there's two specific parts of the stress response. Again, nervous system response, and then there's the endocrine system. Now, the first part I want to talk about is the nervous system part. And sometimes we call this, so the nervous system is divided into two parts. Let me clarify. The nervous system is divided into multiple parts. But right now we're talking about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system, which is the part that's thought to be automatic. The other part is called the somatic. It's the part like move your muscles. You think about that, move my muscle. The autonomic is more automatic, heart rate, blood pressure, It's your digestion. It's all these processes in your body, temperature control that you don't think about. You don't think about it because it's automatic, right? Or we thought it was automatic. But you know, those stories about those monks meditating in caves who could, in the winter with no clothes on, unable to control their body temperature, we learned that you actually can influence a process we thought was automatic. The two different parts of the autonomic nervous system, one's called the sympathetic nervous system, which has been called the fight or flight, like, and parasympathetic. And the analogy we use often is like the car, right? Sympathetic is the gas, so gas is on, you're going full steam, and the parasympathetic is the brakes, turn it off. In general, and you see that scale in the middle, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, they're like yin and yang. They're supposed to be in balance. Sympathetic turns on, and then parasympathetic turns it off. On, off, always in a state of, resiliency and on and off. You're supposed to like have a lot of, that's what a resilient system is. It can turn on and then it turns off. It's got flexibility, it can respond to stress, and then it can come back to homeostasis, which is balance. And so this is the way nature made your adrenaline, your stress response. This part of your stress response, which fires up your adrenaline, is the autonomic sympathetic. And then there's something called the relaxation response, which is the parasympathetic. And shout out to my friend Kathy Farrah at the Center for Mind Body Medicine. I didn't steal the slide; she offered it to me. But anyway, thank you for the slide. I like the pictures and how it's written out. So sympathetic nervous system, again, is the gas, right? So sympathetic nervous system is the gas. Sympathetic nervous system is hardwired. Okay, this is the nervous system. Think of it like wiring in your body. The nerves release adrenaline, or a form of adrenaline, right? The nerves are hardwired into the adrenal glands. They sit on top of each kidney. Your adrenal glands. You have the outer part of the adrenal glands, which makes cortisol, which I'm going to tell you about in a second, and the inner part of the adrenal gland makes adrenaline. Adrenaline is like what makes your heart race, and you sweat, and your blood pressure go up, and all sorts of things happen that's got you wired up for the fight or flight when you have a stress response. It's adrenaline. And so this sympathetic, what happens when you have this fight or flight response, right? Your muscles get tense, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. I said that already. But things like, people say to me all the time, oh, my hands and feet are so cold. Why am I cold all the time? It's my thyroid gland. And I say to them, well, it could actually be stress. It could be your adrenals, which is adrenaline in the stress response. Because adrenaline causes your blood to constrict. It causes vasoconstriction in the perimeter, right? In your legs and arms and your hands and feet and legs and arms. And it moves the blood to the core of your body. And so that's what, come here. The dog is growling at the door because it's closed. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So the fight or flight response, sympathetic, shunts the blood out of your fingers and your hands get cold. The other thing is people who suffer from chronic constipation, all this sluggish, everyone's constipated. I talk poop all the time in my office all day. Everybody's constipated. Oops, I think I'm letting the dog out. One second. Go ahead. Sorry. Better than having the dog annoy us the whole time. So everyone has sluggish bowels. Well, the adrenaline, the fight or flight response that fires up your adrenaline system and your sympathetic nervous system, it slows down your digestion, shuts it off. Because, if you're running from a tiger, you don't need to be digesting. You need all that blood to go to your muscles. And so the blood goes to your muscles and shuts off your digestion. So everything slows down. You don't make your enzymes. You don't move the food through your gut. And so a lot of people don't realize the importance of relaxation and helping increase motility in the gut. And we'll talk about that with parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system and fight or flight stress shuts off the immune system. And I'm going to give you more specifics about exactly what it does, but it definitely slows down the immune system. It shuts off certain parts of it, and it definitely will affect your sleep, lower your sex drive, you get more irritable, right? There's all these things. This isn't good. And so that's your fight or flight. Now, your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your yin yang, right? So that was the, I talked about the sympathetic and the fight or flight, and that's the gas. And then the opposite of that is the brakes. And so the brakes is called the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, there's something called the vagus nerve, which I'm not going to test you on, but the only reason I'm bringing it up is because it's the most powerful. That's what engages your whole parasympathetic nervous system pretty much in the body. It's this huge nerve that travels from your brainstem and your brain all the way. It actually, one of it comes down the front to your heart to control your heart rate. One branch goes down your back. The other branches go down your back and go all the way to your adrenal glands and into your digestive system. And the one that comes down the front runs through your lungs. And it winds its way powerfully through your whole lungs and your diaphragm. And so when you take a deep breath, you tweak it and you engage the vagus nerve, and it turns on your relaxation response. And this is why all meditative practices or all breathing practices, anything that involves, really breathing and deep breathing, pranayama in yoga, these things all are really important for, let me fix that. So these things really make a difference for engaging relaxation. They're powerful ways to engage your relaxation system because you're engaging the vagus nerve. And so the vagus nerve touches every organ in the body. And so when you engage your relaxation response, which is parasympathetic, which is the brakes, you turn on the relaxation response, which is the yin yang, right? Lowers the heart rate, blood pressure, your sleep gets better, your immune system is now functioning again, sex drive gets better, digestion's better, everything's better. If nothing else, for all those reasons, it's a good reason to not live in the land of the stress response, right? You want to live in the land of parasympathetic. And so you want to live in the land of balance. You want to have a gentle on, you want to be able to go on and off and on and off. And so it's, you don't want to be stuck in the extreme of either one. You can be stuck in extreme parasympathetic, which is, we call that the freeze response, which does happen in trauma sometimes. And you don't want to get stuck in the extreme of the stress response either, and frozen on. And we'll talk more about that in a sec. But this is why I mentioned, I already said this about breathing. So breathing is automatic, right? You breathe, you don't think about it. But it's also something that's voluntary, right? Because the breathing, you're actually taking a deep breath. And you're consciously, it's the intersection of sort of conscious and automatic. And it engages relaxation. So all the mind-body techniques that we're going to talk about and in general are all engage the parasympathetic nervous system. So now let's talk about one of our favorite other hormones or other parts of the relaxation system. It's cortisol. Now, I show this picture again. Thank you to CMBM for the image, which I borrowed. This is your brain. This is a picture of your brain. And you see, so the brain, so I want you to think of it this way. There's the brain, which is that whole yellow part. And the brain is where all your emotions, thoughts, and feelings and memories and all that stuff's happening. And then there's something called the pituitary, which is sort of where that red line is. You see there's a little line that says, actually use my mouse. Here's the pituitary. And it's this little island that's down here. And the pituitary secretes it's hormone releasing factors. And the pituitary, wait one second. Out you go. I'm having dog problems tonight. How funny is that? Okay. So the pituitary releases releasing hormones. It tells the organs, the endocrine organs, to work. And so the pituitary releases something called ACTH, which tells the adrenal glands to release cortisol. So there's this intersection. So this is where the mind-body sort of intersection happens. It's very exciting, right? This is where your emotions, thoughts, and feelings and stress, feelings of stress, and it funnels in and it translates right into an action in your body because it goes to the pituitary and causes the release of a hormone that gets cortisol going. Okay, it triggers the stress system. And so you can see it, there's a whole mechanism that's worked out, and you don't need to, remember it, but I want you to see it because it's called psychoneuroimmunology. It's really where everything that you're thinking and feeling gets translated into action. And so you can have, again, you can see here's the brainstem, that's where the nervous system part goes, but for our purposes, we're talking about the endocrine system now. Endocrine system is your hormones. It's all your hormones, the whole hormone orchestra. Cortisol, and so you see I wrote brain translates emotions, memories, thoughts, feelings. The hormone response ends up in the secretion of cortisol. Now, the pituitary also is in charge of your estrogen and your testosterone and your thyroid. It's in charge of all of your whole endocrine organ, your endocrine system, which is your thyroid, your adrenals, and your sex organs. If you're a man, it's the testes. If you're a woman, it's your ovaries. And those are the main endocrine organs. The pancreas, the insulin is also considered an endocrine, hormone, one of the main hormones, but the pituitary is in charge of these guys. And, the ovaries, the testes, the thyroid, and the adrenals. And so, but we're focusing for today on the stress system, which is your adrenals. And so when you have a stress response, it starts in your brain, and your brain tells your adrenals to make cortisol. Now, cortisol is the main stress hormone. You don't have it, you die. That's why it's called a primary hormone. Other hormones in your body, like your estrogen and testosterone and sex hormones, those are secondary. You don't have them, you die. And thyroid's a primary hormone too. You need that as well. But cortisol is really, really important. In the outer part of the adrenals, you make cortisol, as well as these other hormones are actually made in the adrenals too, which I'll show you in a second. But the medulla, which I don't know if you can see me, but I made I have my fist and then my hand around my fist. The inner part of the adrenals is where the adrenaline is made, and that's where the hard wiring from the nervous system goes in. But the cortex makes cortisol. Now, cortisol is a really important stress hormone. And why is that? When you have stress, or when the body needs to wire up and to have a stress response and fight or flight, cortisol comes out because what it does is it raises your blood sugar so that you can run or get energy or perk up, right? So raises your blood sugar. It raises your blood pressure, right? Keeps you to really get the blood pumping to every organ. It prepares your body and mind to deal with stress. It shuts off your immune system because it doesn't want, in case you get injured, you want to shut off your immune system. It reduces inflammation. So in case you got injured, it wants to shut all those systems down to tamp down inflammation and too much immune activation. So cortisol suppresses all that. And if anybody's ever been on prednisone, that's the hormone, that's a prescription form, of cortisol, and it suppresses the immune system, turns off inflammation, raises your blood sugar. It does all of those things. It also breaks down your muscle over too long a period of time. You might also know it can break down your bone and increase your risk of osteoporosis. It can break down your muscle and increase the risk of low muscle density, sarcopenia, that's called. But anyway, so cortisol is adaptive in the very short run when you have acute stress, right? So if you have something happens in the short term, it's good. It gets you ready. It gets you going, right? But the problem is, and so some people will call this good stress, right? So there's something called good stress. Stress response can be adaptive under normal circumstances. The problem is that, right. And so I forgot I had the slide in here. So yeah, and so these guys are really using their stress response to help them, right? They're clearly this is a good stress, right? They're recreating, and they're in the middle of their Super Bowl here, but they're coping, and believe me, they're in a full-on fight or flight to get out of that jam that they're in. And so, but what's going to happen is, if you imagine them, They get through the rapids, and they're calm afterwards, and they'll shake it off. Their body will calm down, and they'll have a lull in between until they get to the next rapid, right? But they're in the middle of a hairy situation, and they're going to have a full-on response, and then afterwards they'll hit calm waters, and they'll breathe, and they'll laugh, and their whole system will come back to balance. And so what does this feel like? You know, so this is like stressed and wired, right? Acute or traumatic stress. And, you know, those guys, that was just immediate. But what happens if that goes on for a period of time? This is where you can end up starting to feel anxious, right? You're running high adrenaline, and in the brain, that's called epinephrine, norepinephrine. Those are the catecholamines that are released, dopamine, but they can make you anxious, right? So you run high in this sort of category of neurotransmitters called catecholamine. The pressure on the cortisol system, you start losing your sex hormones because they are sacrificed to keep the cortisol going, and you start like, and also when you're in an intense stress response, your brain stem, which is your sort of reptilian brain, we call it, takes over, because that's sort of that's just like the very primal kind of reaction. And your mammalian brain, which is the more advanced part of your brain, which is the frontal lobe that thinks and is rational, it gets hijacked. You can't think about anything. You can't remember stuff. You can't focus because you've been hijacked by the stress response. And it's a known thing. It's like a real thing that happens in the brain where the stress response hijacks the your frontal lobe activity, and you just can't function in that, in the thinking rational kind of way. And so it keeps you from sleeping, it keeps you wired and up at night, and you can't sleep. People over-exercise to try to burn it off, and people start noticing they're getting sick a lot. And so this is sort of how I imagine this looks when you're stuck in acute stress for a prolonged period of time. Now, over time, what happens? Over time, if you really stay there for a long period of time, you might notice that your blood sugar is drifting up. And there are people who eat a really good diet, but they end up with diabetes. And the reason why is because of cortisol. Because cortisol is busy raising your blood sugar, no matter what you eat. And that causes your insulin to go up. And when you have high insulin and high blood sugar, you end up with belly fat. And then all of a sudden you've got this belly. And the abdominal obesity is when there's fat wrapped around your inner organs. So it's wrapped around your stomach and your intestines and your liver. And there's all sorts of, if the surgeon opened you up, there'd be just fat inside your abdominal cavity. And it's called brown fat because it's inflammatory. It releases inflammation chemicals. And that's called abdominal obesity. And it's associated with something we call metabolic syndrome. And so these things can happen purely from chronic high prolonged stress and release of cortisol over months and months and months. It lead to eventually hypertension. I told you about loss of muscle. People come in and say, my hair's falling out, my nails won't grow. If you're living in the land of high cortisol, you can't grow stuff. Your body won't repair itself. Your hair will, you can't grow hair and nails and build muscle when you're living in the land of high cortisol. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone. It breaks things down. Insulin, I was going to say, is an anabolic hormone. It builds things up. Testosterone is an anabolic hormone. It builds things up. It helps you build muscle. Cortisol breaks it down. And the other thing that cortisol does is it seriously affects your ability to fight viruses, because what it does is it shuts off what's called the Th1 system in the lymphocytes. And so you're different soldiers in your immune army. And for those of you who are into this stuff, I'll just tell you what happens, but I'm not going to test you on it. But cortisol selectively inhibits the part of the soldiers in the army of your immune system that fight viruses. And so you find you're getting sick a lot. And that's really a big problem. And so what happens then is over time, there's a loss of resiliency. that happens. And resiliency, when I think of resilience, the goal of health, like what is it to be healthy? What is it to, how do you maintain health as you age? And the goal is, I talk about the gut as an ecosystem, and I'm going to talk more about that next time. We're going to focus on gut health in my next class. But so there's a resiliency and like an ecosystem you want to develop in the gut microbiome that's going to help you be resilient to what happens. The same thing with the adrenals and with your stress system. Think of it like your stress system. So I just explained to you, here's your stress system. And it needs to be resilient. It needs to be flexible. It needs to have juice. It needs to have the capacity to turn on and off. And you don't want to lose its reserves. And over time, if your system is stuck on, those adrenals can start losing their reserves. And they end up not being as able to respond appropriately to stress. And, you know, in the integrative functional medicine world, we've called this adrenal fatigue for a really long time. You know, I have colleagues now, I've been doing functional medicine for 20 years. I did my first training in 2001. Back in those days, we always called it adrenal fatigue. Now, like, there's a little pushback on that term, but what I would say is it's really, I would call it loss of adrenal resiliency, loss of adrenal reserves, because you can measure this and you can see like all the cortisol, like really low levels of cortisol. And, you know, in the conventional arena, there is a code called adrenal insufficiency. And I think I've seen people that I've actually given that code to from a conventional perspective because they really have very low hormones. And that's adrenal insufficiency. If you can't respond, if you're insufficiently able to pump out the hormones, then that's a real thing. And so I think that it's really important. So we do not want to end up at this place where we lose all that resiliency and we end up with adrenal insufficiency. We'll call it adrenal fatigue for lack of a better word. Now, people say to me all the time, how long is this going to take for this to happen to me? And I have no idea. Because it depends on a lot of things. It depends on how bad your stressors are and how long how severe they've been, how many you've had, how long it's been going on, and how well you've been taking care of yourself. It's sort of a net, right? It's like all the stressors and how long you've had them, and what you've been doing to mitigate them hurting you, damaging your body. And that means, do you practice meditation? Do you do something relaxing? Do you do yoga? Do you go out for walks in nature? I mean, there's all sorts of things you could do, but do you actively have a plan, or have you actively thought about how you're managing to keep your adrenals from pooping out, okay? And your stress system from no longer being there to help serve you. And over time, if you're not taking care of yourself and you have long-term ongoing chronic stress, this is where you end up. And that's not fun. There have been a few times in my life that's where I've been, and it's not fun. And it's not fun. And so what does this feel like? Completely exhausted, can't get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes you can get yourself going, but then you crash in the afternoon, and then a second wind. Sometimes people say second wind at night. Inflammation everywhere, because once the cortisol is gone, you start developing inflammation. Cortisol actually helps you put out the inflammation in your body, and once it runs out, or you really are insufficient in your ability to mount a response, you actually end up more inflamed. Cortisol affects all your other hormones, and I actually want to show you that here. So don't worry, this is, for any of you who've ever seen me in the office, this is called a Dutch test, and I do this this is my favorite hormone test that I do. But everything here in this picture is what's happening in the outer part of your adrenal glands. And after menopause, when your ovaries aren't really making estrogen, you see I have lines here. So here's your cortisol, and it's circled in red. And then I underlined progesterone over here, testosterone over here, and estrogen over here. And after menopause, when your ovaries aren't really making any of the sex hormones anymore, they get to be made in your adrenal glands. And so if your adrenals are fatigued or they don't have juice, you going through menopause, or even for men going through andropause or the hormone situation later in your life, can become a problem. And so stress has a big effect on the whole endocrine orchestra. And so if you have a lot of stress, you can notice that you're using up your progesterone is low because it's being used to make your cortisol in your adrenal glands, and your periods are irregular. After menopause, you can go through menopause and have terrible symptoms. Low sex drive from low testosterone. Because when there's stress here, this is a primary hormone. All of these are secondary. You don't have cortisol. I told you this before you die, but all these are sacrificed. So the first thing that happens, stage 1 of chronic stress, is all these hormones go down. So you end up with low progesterone, and that affects your cycle. Low testosterone, that affects muscle mass, sex drive, and also low estrogens, which will affect your cycle clearly as well. And so the point of this slide is not for you to memorize any of that, but I want you to understand that stress and ongoing chronic stress that you have, if you're in the gas, let's just talk about it as the gas, that if your foot's on the gas all the time and you never take your foot off the gas and put on the brakes, if you're just on the gas, then your gas tank is going to get emptied first of all these other hormones, and then eventually the cortisol. And it's all connected. So cortisol is the entry point and the flash point for your whole endocrine orchestra. Okay? All right. So those are the basics. Now, I want to give you some specifics about the immune system, right? Because we're doing Immune System Strong. This is why we're here for this class. And so this is really important. So stress and immunity. So when you talk about your immune system, and you guys, I've given you these lectures before. I did them in my my video series. I talked about where the immune system is and the lymph nodes and all of that. But you can see it here on this picture, which is sort of nice. These are all places where your immune system is making its soldiers. Think of this whole thing as the military, and then there's divisions and there's soldiers. And so these are all the places where your soldiers are laying in wait to fight the good fight. And we call them lymphocytes, are the main ones that are going to fight viruses. And so the lymphocytes are laying in wait, and there's multiple different kinds of lymphocytes. And what happens is cortisol damages where the lymphocytes are developing. They develop, and all these are, think of them like army bases. And the lymphocytes are hanging out like in the army bases, I'm just undeveloped, right? So they're sort of precursors. Think that the soldiers are in their barracks, but they don't have all their stuff on them, right? They haven't been fully trained, and so the cortisol. But they go through series of growth and development and training at these army bases. Well, cortisol comes along and it shuts the whole thing down. Ain't no training. Ain't no maturation. They don't become fully trained soldiers, as well as they shut down, like I told you before, the antiviral. And so in general, this is a really big deal. Cortisol shuts that down. In those lymphatic organs, the nerves are hardwired into those organs as well. So not only does cortisol go into and bathe all those, your lymph nodes and the lymphatic tissue in your gut and your spleen and everywhere, but nerves are hardwired in there too. And they do the same thing, and they drop the viral fighting lymphocytes. And so sympathetic nerves do that too. Now, what about the gut? And this is really important because you guys are in week 3, and so you started your gut work, right? So this is the week that you start the gut program, which is the Heal My Gut part of helping the immune system, and this is part of the reason why. And we'll talk more about this in my next class. The gut microbiome, a healthy gut is a healthy immune system. 70% of your immune cells, all those immune cells that actually, let me see if I could point that out to you. It doesn't really give it dang, you see, it's not in this picture, but the biggest place where your immune system is in your gut, where my mouse is. So you have all these lymphatic and lymph nodes, all these lymph nodes line your intestines. And there's 70% of your immune system lines, here's your colon, and you have small intestine in there, and there's like lymph nodes everywhere. And so the flowers, which represents your healthy bacteria, your gut microbiome, the flowers and the gut, your good bacteria interact with your with where your immune cells are and help them develop in a healthy way. And interesting that cortisol is actually released when you have a stress response. Cortisol is sent in to the intestines. It bathes your bacteria in your gut. Those gut microbiome, all those 100 trillion bacteria, they are bathed in cortisol, and the cortisol promotes the bad bacteria and yeast it increases them to grow. It inhibits the good stuff, and you increase the risk of the bad stuff. And the other big thing it does is it suppresses the immune response in the gut, which is meant to help prevent the bad microbes from overgrowing. And so my analogy is there's flowers in the gut, which are the stuff you eat in yogurt, for example, right? Lactobacillus bifidus, but there's like 1,000 strains. And then there's weeds that always want to grow in the garden. So cortisol increases the risk of the weeds, decreases the robustness of the flowers, and impairs your immune system's ability to make sure the flowers stay healthy. And so cortisol is really important. And the nervous system, the adrenaline, is also hardwired into your intestines and released into the intestinal wall when you have a fight or flight response. And it does the same exact thing as the cortisol. And in addition, what this does is it increases your risk of leaky gut, which is really bad for those of you who have already read the guide and my book, and you know what that is. But I'll talk about that more in the next class, which is the loss of integrity of your intestinal lining, which causes bacteria and food and the contents of your intestines flowing into your bloodstream, which is not good and causes inflammation. And so that's my little story about, how exactly the mechanism of what's happening with the stress system influencing your immune system. Okay, and so now we come into, I'm breathing, I'm going to take a breath and a drink of water. Actually, I have a little lemon in there. All right, it's 15 more minutes, so we're good. So this is going to be the end of wrapping up, right? So we're coming now to Mind Body Medicine, and this is now okay. Well, all right, Dr. Blum. Well, you told us all this like bad stuff about the stress system, and we are all very stressed right now. And we've been living in the land of high cortisol. We've been living in the land of the gas. What do we do about it? And how do we put the brakes on? And so this is where, again, like I mentioned, this is where Mind Body Medicine comes in. See, I breathe and I slow down. But I also am always worried I'm going to run out of time, so I always talk fast until I realize I'm at the end of the slides and I could relax. So Mind Body Medicine. And so Mind Body Skills are just different kinds of exercises you can do that will engage the relaxation response. We just want to turn on parasympathetic. So my message is that, you know what? We can't always change our stressors. We can't always change what's coming in because so much of life is out of our control, which we've come to learn, especially as we get older. But we can't change our stresses all the time. We have some control over some of them, I will put forth. But what we can do is change how they come into the body. We can change whether or not we get sick from it. My joke always is about the things you can change is there's something I call preventive scheduling. I know when I schedule another thing on that next Wednesday that I'm going to have a terrible day. It's like, what did I do? Why did I put that in on that day? And so sometimes we can choose to reduce our stress by the way we schedule ourselves. So I will put that forward. You could reduce your stress by not watching as much news. There's different things you can do to reduce your stress. So there is some in your control, but there's to reduce your stressors, right? But there's a lot that's not in our control. And so this is why we have to find something to do every day. Every day you have to find a way to engage your relaxation system. It's not only, it's for physical, but it's also to help you with insight and to promote mindfulness. Now, mindfulness just means being in this moment. It's when you're here, you're here. You're not thinking about the future and worrying about something that's tomorrow, and you're not dwelling on and ruminating and angsting about the past. You're just here. Because when, like for me, when I meditate, I have a meditation practice every morning, and I've been meditating a long time, so I don't have any sort of structure I follow so much anymore, but I'm definitely doing my breathing, my breath. I come in and I start with just focusing on my breath, bringing my attention to my breath. But it's noticing when your mind goes away and then coming back to your breath. And you're practicing being in this moment. And when you practice being in this moment and you're doing that in a practice every day, you start getting better at focus and concentration because you become aware of like being here. You learn how to stay here. You don't worry about the future as much. So you start to feel less anxious. You become more sort of checking in with yourself and aware of your, ideas and intuition about decisions that you have to make. You turn on relaxation response, so it helps with your stress system. It becomes healthy and balanced again. And so all mind body techniques help you with that. And there's a lot of examples: biofeedback, autogenics, guided imagery. But what I want to point out to you guys is that in your guidebook, now I'm going to sort of be concrete now and back to the program that we're doing, the Immune System Strong. So we call it the Learn to Relax program. And it is an 8-session program that has 8 ideas for you with scripts and guided, with a guide, right? That we're going to guide you through ideas for you to do every week for 8 weeks, 8 different things to try. And so it's woven into your guidebook. So every week you'll see the instructions and the description. And there's a link to a Dropbox where we have all the tracks for you to download. And you should have found that already. And if you don't, you can definitely ask Melissa to find that. And, when I come out of my share screen here, I'll see if I can pull up the guidebook and I'll show you where that is. But these are the 8 tracks. There's guided, it's actually Elizabeth, our our nurse practitioner at Blum Center. She recorded everything. And so it's a body scan, and walk, and she instructions for walk in nature, but the guided imageries and the guided visualizations are body scan. She takes you through deep breathing, Shavasana, instructions on walk in nature, relaxing into sleep, soft belly breathing. This is a nice breath work, and some guided visualizations and imageries. And so these things not only will help you relax, but they will give you some insight into your life. And there's so many ways in. And so the goal is to give you a whole like buffet, right? Come to the buffet, try some different things and see what you like. And hopefully you'll find something that you want to practice every day. Because the idea is just to find something. So I'm going to come out of my share. And I'm going to see, actually, one second. I'm going to actually look for, I think I have the guidebook here. All right, well, maybe I don't. Sorry, guys. I thought I had it all teed up for you, but I'm not seeing it. So, yeah. All right, maybe it's up on my screen somewhere. All right, but Melissa will show you where it is on the in terms of the guidebook, and you'll be able to get that. And yeah, no. Okay. Let me see. Actually, you know what? Give me one sec because I know exactly where I can go to get it. And it's here, and it's here, and it's here. And I'm going to download that, and I'm going to open it. I'm going to show you. There we go. And all right. And so I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to show you where it is. And so this is really important because this is a tool for you guys. All right. So here's Immune System Strong. And let me just put that other stuff all away. I don't know what you can see and what you can't. But if you see, this is your guidebook. And I'm just going to scroll down because you're going to see what I'm talking about in terms of the Learn to Relax program. And so as you scroll down, you're going to see the introduction to Learn to Relax. This is the food part. You've already done this. I hope you all very much know your guidebook really well. And Learn to Relax. So this is the introduction to the Learn to Relax program. We sort of explain about stress, of course. And then there's, it says right here on this page, download my kit now. Okay? This is where you're going to go to get to your MP3 downloads. And this is where all the guided imageries are. And so what you do when you click on this is you end up in a Dropbox. And so this is where all the tracks are. And these are MP3 tracks. And so you open it on your computer and you press play. Now I would suggest that when you do that, okay, so that's that. And so I would suggest when you do that, and you download it and then you play it, but get comfortable. And we give you instructions each week. So each of those tracks, there's an instruction on every week of the guidebook. Okay. And so, you know, when I do guided or meditations or imagery, I always like get comfortable and sometimes lay down or sit in a chair and make my feet on the floor. So just make sure you're comfortable and not just like wired up, you know, and just start playing it, right? So the idea is to actually create a practice where it's the same time every day. Like for me, I get up and I meditate and I have my setup where my cushion is in the same place. I have a corner, you know, so a habit, create a new healthy habit and create a new routine. And that will really help you. And so, so with that, that's really the end of our talk on stress. And what Melissa's going to be working with you in coaching is going to be really practicing this. So the practical tools, giving you tips, helping you where you're stuck. But our goal is really to help you find a way to make this a part of your everyday life. It's about engaging relaxation. So it could be reading a pleasure book. It could be going for a walk in nature without your phone, or turning it off and not turning it on, like sticking it in a coat pocket. Anything that helps you turn it off and helps you stay here. I do like the more meditation kind of practices too, because they're more introspective. And they're more introspective, and they allow you with the mindfulness to sort of check into your own intuition to help you make decisions. All right, so if anybody has any questions, hi Nancy. Oh, I'm 10% happier. And Nancy just asked if I read the book 10% Happier. Yes, I read the book. I love that book, and actually I gave it to some people, mostly men. Sorry, that's not me being sexist. It's and not just men, it's people who are very left-brained and just can't believe that they would ever be able to meditate. And that guy tells his journey, and he's just a total, you know, somebody that you would never expect to sort of buy into the whole meditation and how meditation can make you happier. So that's a great recommendation. So Nancy's recommending it's called 10% Happier. It's an easy read. Okay. It's a really easy read. So I would definitely suggest that. Oh, and there's an app also. Look at that. I didn't know that. And there's also an app. You see, and so this is why you should go on our Facebook group and post these kinds of things. And Nancy, maybe you want to post that on Facebook for us, because thank you. Because the Facebook group is where we can share ideas and support each other. You've all done things I've never done. And I'm sharing the things I've tried and what's been meaningful and helpful for me. But you know, community, You know, this is why I built Plum Center for Health. You know, I have this big bricks and mortar place. And in the world where everybody's doing everything online, you know, I have, you know, cooking classes and meditation classes like on site, and a team. We have team meetings. And, you know, I just think community is so important. And that's why we're trying to keep even the way I'm doing online, you know, still trying to create this sense of community. And I hope that you all feel that, you know, as you're going through the program. And Melissa's amazing at that, um, you know, at leading, you know, the group community. So, all right. Well, there are no other questions, I thought I saw a hand raised. Let me just see if I could find that. Um, Somebody raised their hand, I think, and so feel free to put that in. Any questions have to go in the into the chat so I could see it, because I don't know what happened to the raised hand, because it's, maybe I just don't know how to do the webinar thing to find the hand raised. So so anyway, all right, well, good. I'm right on time. And so with that, I'm going to close the class for today. I hope you really all learned a lot. You know, my goal was to really teach you the importance of the stress system in your health, and to really stress the importance of why I want you to really dig in with the program, do the coaching, follow the guidebook, do the exercises, find something that suits you. Everybody, just like everybody has different stressors, everybody's choice of the things they're going to do for their daily relaxation is different. But you have to find a way to put your foot on the brake and take your foot off the gas every day. Every day. I don't care what it is. And I'm not talking about watching TV. I'm talking about something actively where you're bringing your mind and centering it into yourself, where you're coming here. You're checking in with yourself to see what, you know, am I feeling anxious today? Like, see what you're feeling, because trust me, if you don't allow that stuff to bubble up during the day, it's going to keep you up at night. And you're probably all laughing, half of you, because you're waking up at night with like things you're worrying about. You need to find space. You need to create space for those things during the day. You need to create space for your worries and your thoughts and your feelings, and like your mullings over the things you're struggling with, to have a place to land during the day. And when you have some sort of a practice where you're just you and whatever it is you're doing, even if it's your knitting, you're in this moment, you're going to be like thinking about stuff. You're going to give it space. You're going to give it room, right? To let emotion come up, to let grief move through you, to let worry move through you, and to name it and to feel it. And so the goal is to name, feel, let all that stuff come up and move through you, so that you don't hold it. And holding that will keep that stress response going, and as well as affect your emotions and mood, and none of that's good for your health. So on that note, I wish you all good feelings and good practice of being with yourself and learning about yourself as part of this program, and as we're weaving it through your weeks. And I wish you a really good gut cleanse, if you're assuming those of you who are jumping in with both feet and participating in taking the herbs and all the supplements and doing the gut treatment, or in whatever way you're participating in the gut program. This is gut weeks in these weeks. And next class, we're going to dig in, and I'm going to tell you all sorts of cool stuff about gut and gut health and long-term gut health. So it's not just about what you're doing now, it's how we're going to keep you, how am I going to help show you how to have a long-term healthy gut ecosystem that's resilient. Okay? Have a great night. I will talk to you next time.